Well, we are here at 7 p.m.
Okay.
Let's start. Hi, everybody. First off, I have to start this evening with a mea culpa because there were two very bad things I did last week. One was that my screen sharing and audio sharing was incorrect. So the quality of the sound that you were hearing was not great, and I apologize for that. I was sharing my screen and I should have shared my audio directly. So that's why maybe last week's sound was not so great. So I'm sorry about that. And two, which is, I think, more egregious, but I referred to a Schoenberg essay, Brahms the Progressive, and I said that it was written in the 1910s, and it was actually written in 1947. On the 50th anniversary of Brahms's death. So, yikes, I was way off. So I apologize for that. So I don't want to be spreading out, disinformation and fake news and all that stuff. So, but tonight, we focused on Brahms. Last week, one composer. We focused on a certain type of music 2 weeks ago with program music. And I thought maybe we should look at those composers who don't fit into a sort of form or style. Composers who go out and, with their just their individuality, carve their own path and go forth and just express themselves in their own way. And sometimes these composers will influence those after them. And sometimes it's just a moment in time where this composer is just their music. And then after it, that's it. So it's very interesting. And I thought we should examine some of them. So some of them, I'm going to be playing you five samples this evening. And I'm not going to tell you the composer. I think I'd like you to guess the composer. And some will be very easy, and perhaps the first one will be easy, but some won't be. And then we'll discuss how they came to be and how they fit into everything. And I thought that would be very interesting. I mentioned earlier, before everybody got on, about the composer on my email. For those who I didn't expose the answer to, can we guess who that composer was?
I didn't hear it. We didn't see it.
We don't see it. We don't remember. Igor Stravinsky.
Okay.
An early photo that was colorized of Igor Stravinsky.
Okay. Igor Stravinsky.
Okay. So let's just get started. Let's play some music and let's listen. That's why we're all here, after all, not to hear me bloviate. I have a performance from an artist, and I'm not going to tell you who the artist is. But it's from April 2018. Okay, and we're gonna listen to this and let's see who the composer is. And I'm gonna try to not mess up the sharing of the sound. Here we go.
No sound, no music.
No sound? Hold on. Whoa. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
You see, I blew it. Hold on. I have to click the share button. Here we go.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I should be fired. This is just inexcusable. Here we go. First selection. Here we go. think they liked it.
Wow.
So who was that?
Chopin.
Chopin.
Chopin, yeah.
Such a
Unmistakably Chopin.
All
Yeah.
the music students played that.
So this is what I'm getting at. So you hear that. Who else? What other composers could sound like that? No one.
No.
Why? What is it about Chopin's music that's different that you think?
Very individual sound. I mean, there was no one else before or after.
Yeah.
And so I think that was getting to your point that you made, that and I couldn't, I'm not a pianist, and so I can't tell you what it is, but it's unmistakable. It's an unmistakable sound.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, his interest in dance forms, all his waltzes, all his polonaises. This was a polonaise, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Right. So he his mastery of the dance form, and just the technical virtuosity to pull this off is unbelievable. And I guess the third thing I would say is, well, I guess only two things. That's enough.
Two will do, Paul.
Brain fart. Sorry.
But no, right on the money. So this is the Polonaise in A flat major, Opus 53. It was written in 1842, which meant he was 32 years old. It's known as the heroic Polonaise, and a Polonaise is a Polish dance that is a little bit march-like, and it had been prevalent in music in the 18th century. It wasn't new to Chopin. But Chopin, I mean, what I would say is that there's a certain panache and elegance at the same time. It's just this sweeping, just virtuosic, elegant playing. And Chopin was a different kind of character. I mean, he was a contemporary of Liszt, and Liszt was this guy who just was this virtuoso and toured everywhere. People fawned over him. He was playing concerts left and right throughout his life. Chopin was a prodigy, Polish, obviously, but went to Paris when he was about 21 years old. And for the most part, didn't concertize that much after that point. He would play salon concerts, very private concerts, and he would earn money by writing music and by teaching piano. So he was this bit of sort of an odd duck. He was a sort of this, a definite immigrant bringing this Polish aesthetic into one of the seats of Western culture. And he was revered by his contemporaries. Schumann especially loved him. Liszt adored him, had a very complicated competitive relationship with him. But I wanted to read you a passage from a letter of Schumann. And this is drawing from a Schumann biography of Judith Czernik. It's a very nice book. I finished it about a month ago. So Schumann writes to his teacher, he says, "We spent a wonderful day together. He gave me a new ballade in G minor. It seems to me his most inspired work. Besides that, he played a whole number of new etudes, nocturnes, mazurkas, everything incomparably. Just to see him sitting at the piano was affecting. Try to conceive such perfection, a mastery that seems unconscious itself." And this is Schumann who's been around the block. He goes on, he says, "I told Clara what an unforgettable sight it was to see him at the piano, like a dreaming seer, and how as he played, one became identified in one's own mind with his dream, and how he had a nervous habit at the end of each piece of running a finger from one end of the keyboard to the other in a glissando, as if to break the spell. And now he had to spare himself because of his delicate health. So even Schumann, Chopin sat and he dedicated the Ballade to Schumann, although he had problems with Schumann's works. He wasn't really a big fan of Schumann. Schumann was in awe of this presence at the piano. He just breathed music and was infused with this ease of virtuosity and panache. And you hear that in all of Chopin's writing,
Was he friendly with George Sand? Was he composed? Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's
More than friends.
very
Yes.
good friend.
Very, very, very close friend.
Close friends.
Okay.
But Chopin was a very sickly man. He had health problems throughout his life. He was very slight. He eventually died at the age of 46 of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Oh.
But had a very long and complicated relationship with George Sand in Paris. Yes.
Yes.
But I think, we were talking about what was happening in the 19th century, and you had, again, Mendelssohn, Schumann, Brahms, Berlioz, Wagner, Bruckner, and Chopin.
Yeah.
But he's well remembered in Prague. I remember we walked through the park there. And every time you sat on the bench, the music would start. Always Chopin.
Chopin. But it's, his music was just so singular and just so, and just transcended, what was happening. He was oblivious. He thought he wasn't a fan of the romantic movement of ascribing these literary titles to pieces. He thought music should be just music and beautiful.
A question. Who was the pianist?
Oh, that.
Oh.
I didn't tell you the pianist because I for those who come to the concerts, it would have given it away. It was the Polish pianist Rafał Blechacz, who won the 2004 Chopin competition, and was a bit of a discovery at the series. So,
Derek, was there any, or is there any other composer who composed predominantly, overwhelmingly for the piano?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it, Chopin did really, most of his pieces were just for the piano.
I think that's true, Ellen Dean. I can't think of somebody where that's such a large percentage of the works were for piano. Yeah. And you can hear the two concerti are okay. I think he wrote. Yeah, he wrote very well for the piano, but he didn't really go beyond the scope of the piano. And I think I'm not very drawn to the two concerti, frankly.
It's Chopin, though.
Yeah. Unmistakably.
Did he wrote a quartet? I don't know why I think he wrote a quartet.
I don't think so. I think he wrote a piano trio that's very rare.
Okay.
It was a piano trio. Yeah.
He also wrote, I think, a cello sonata.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Oh, and it's a staple of the cello repertoire. Yes.
And Derek, it's not a big deal, but he was only, I think, 39 when he died.
Yeah, he didn't make it to 40.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm confusing him with Schumann's dates. You're absolutely right. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's all right. But it's even more poignant that you said he was frail and died early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just would add that when I hear it, like when you started playing, by the time you get to the second measure, that distinctiveness of sound, the way he uses the piano, is you can't mistake him for anything. You can't even think of who would, if I were wrong about Chopin, who would be a second choice. There isn't anybody. But the combination of the soaring melodies with these wonderful rhythmic shifts, with this distinctive use of the piano sound and the harmonies, it's a good choice, Derek, for someone who is really unique and no one quite like him.
Yeah, his harmony, it's funny, like his use of harmony, it's very spare. If you look at the harmonic structure of his pieces, it's all, I don't want to say basic, but it's very straightforward, but he embellishes so much that he makes he makes it so interesting and makes it so chromatic within the basic harmonic structure of the piece.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very, if you just look at the downbeats, basically you could see what key, like he's you know, the chord that he's hitting. It's very straightforward, actually.
Were you familiar with Jose Iturbi? He always played Chopin in movies.
No, I don't know him.
Well, maybe before your time.
You're dating yourselves.
But Jose Iturbi, that was a pianist for the films and MGM, I think. And he always played Chopin in that one especially. In movies.
There's also some.
Gershwin.
There's also some very great pianists who just decided in their careers they would just not tackle Chopin.
Oh, yeah.
They just said, that's not for me. That's just too difficult, or that's just outside of my sphere. I can't play Chopin.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Well, I think finally later in his career, Alfred Brendel took him on, but said, you know, for years said, that's just too hard. I can't do that. So,
yeah.
You know, people who you would think of as could play anything, and said,
but that's, you know, with pianists especially, they get into a wheelhouse where they're performing certain repertoire and that they have an affinity for. In that vein, you know, the name Mitsuko Uchida came up to me. I mean, I'm fascinated by her, and she's has very Germanic repertoire, and has never done Chopin. I can say that, maybe at home. But if you get her recording, she has an early recording of the Debussy Etudes. That it's a definitive recording of those pieces, and they're fiendishly difficult works, the Debussy Etudes. I believe she recorded it in the late 80s, if I'm not sure, but anyway, yeah.
Did Horowitz play Chopin much?
Oh my
Yes,
God.
yes.
I associate this Polonaise with Horowitz because I'm of that age. And when it started, it didn't sound like Horowitz, but I heard Horowitz.
Yeah.
I think this was one of his signature pieces, if you will.
Yeah. Just before we leave this piece, and we should, you know, there's a nickname called the Heroic Polonaise. And again, Chopin hated these names. These were ascribed by publishers after the fact. He hated ascribing any name, the Minute Waltz and everything. That it was not Chopin who did that. So this is known as the Heroic Polonaise, but it had nothing to do with Schumann calling it the Heroic Polonaise. So anyway, moving right along. We have a performance from 2007, January 21st of 2007, with the mezzo-soprano Christiana Stotan, the Dutch mezzo-soprano, with Julius Drake. And I want you to guess this one. There are two songs in this selection. Here we go.
We're sitting in the opera house, the opera house, the opera house. We're waiting for the curtain to arrive. We want this for our eyes. We're feeling pretty gay while we make. Oh, Jimmy, look! I say the band is tuning up and soon we'll start to play. We whistle and we happy time with the drum. We whistle and we happy time with the drum. We're sitting in the opera house, the opera house, the opera house, waiting for the curtain to light upon the far eyes. A feeling of expectancy, a certain kind of ecstasy, expectancy and ecstasy, expectancy and ecstasy. Shh, 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 shh. Curtain! Fredde
Okay. What do you think?
Was the first Gilbert and Sullivan?
That's what it sounded like.
That was like,
I think it might be Charles Ives.
It might be Charles Ives.
No, I don't think so.
Nobody's right so far, Derek. Not Hugo Wolf. No.
No, I gotta tell Gary, Charles Ives.
Oh,
Really?
Charles Ives. This is the curveball of the evening.
Yeah, very good.
Yes.
okay.
So Ives, as we know, an American, an insurance guy, a Yalie. His father was a band director, and he wrote this at Yale.
Oh.
And Charles Ives wrote 175 songs throughout his career. Who knew? And this song, it's two songs. It's called Memories. And the first one's called Very Pleasant. And the second one is called Rather Sad.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So I threw a curveball because we heard Ives a couple weeks ago with the violin sonata. This is obviously not idiomatic of his other music, but I thought by presenting a program of Iconoclasts and not including Charles Ives would be a boo-boo. So yes, Charles Ives is again a singular composer whose language, his harmonic language, is like no other. I think I referred to him as atonal, but he's actually what's known as polytonal, which means that he has two different keys, often two separate harmonies at the same time, two separate keys. And he was a complete maverick in his composition.
Derek, I was at a concert once, and sometimes not only does he have two keys, he has two conductors. Seriously, for one of his symphonies, there were two conductors at one point.
Mm.
It was with the BSO. There was I forget whoever was conducting, and then there was a second conductor who somewhere in the middle of the piece stood up from the orchestra and was also conducting.
Interesting. I don't know the piece. That's, yeah, I'm wondering which piece.
I don't remember now, but.
But Charles Ives is a trailblazer, and you know, even after he passed, who sounds like Charles Ives?
Right.
Nobody.
This piece preceded those characteristics you were talking about in the idiomatic Charles Ives, because this you don't hear that language here, do you?
No, he was a kid. I mean, you know, when he was at Yale, his compositions were fairly conservative, and I think after he left, it became more radical, his writing.
He studied Horatio Parker. So in other words, he studied with the current composers of the day and obviously absorbed everything, but then, as you say, struck out on his own, and with the influence of everything that he heard in Danbury, Connecticut, which is where he grew up, as you say, his father, the band leader, he melded the tradition that he learned from Horatio Parker at Yale with all of these other sound influences from his childhood. And they came together in the four symphonies. And I think, Alan Dean, it's either the third or fourth, maybe the fourth, that was the two conductors. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's move on. That's the tricky one of the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a clip. This is a performance by the Belcher Quartet from October 14th, 2018, and it's about 6 minutes long. Let's give a listen.
I'm going out on a limb. I'll say Webern.
I'll
Too
go
long
out
for
and say
Webern.
Shostakovich.
Is it
Shostakovich.
Janacek? Is it Janacek?
Janacek.
Janacek.
It took me a long time to get there.
Janacek.
Yes.
Wow.
Is it the Intimate Letters?
Greg Anderson, you winner chicken dinner.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, this is the slow movement of Intimate Letters, his
Wow.
second string quartet.
Yep.
The last piece he ever wrote. And this is a piece that it wasn't an affair. He was married and separated, but had this infatuation with the woman
It was an
who was quite a
obsession.
bit younger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this piece is just an outpouring of his passion for this woman. That's why it's Intimate Letters. So communications back and forth to this woman. And there's no proof that she had any interest in him.
I don't think she did.
I don't think she did. So here's Janacek, and Janacek, that's the first half of the 20th century, the early 20th century. This piece is 1928, and he's sort of like the modernist version of Dvorak, in that, of course, they're both Slavic. I mean, that's obvious, but they were both very interested in folk music. Janacek in his early life was a folklorist. I was very, very interested in Czech folk music. And he just, he didn't hit fame until later in life. His operas brought him a lot of attention. Cunning Little Vixen and Yenufa, I think Yenufa was his last opera. And he has these amazing works like the Sinfonietta for orchestra. I don't know if you know that piece, but it starts off with this blaring brass chorale with, I think it's scored for about 15 trumpets. And it's just an amazing piece of music. An amazing piece of music. Just searing music. And you hear these harmonies and wow, I mean, we've got Webern, Shostakovich. I mean, this is the thing. And Janacek he just stayed on his path. At the time, Schoenberg was out there doing his thing. And Janacek says, I'm doing this. This is when, after, the end of tonality and when Schoenberg goes into the 12-tone method, things splinter. Just as they did with in the 19th century of stylistic. It just splinters in a more dramatic fashion. And Janacek's quartets, those two quartets are just stunning pieces of music. Absolutely stunning pieces of music. And frightfully difficult to play. Frightfully difficult. And the Belcha, you don't have to, they're one of my favorites. That I think they're one of the great quartets in the world.
That was an amazing performance too.
Just a fantastic. I mean, you forget, I don't doctor these recordings.
Yeah.
These are live. They're not patched. They're not edited. This is what you heard in the concert hall. And it's just, you hear the just searing passion in this music with Janacek. And with the theme, there's nothing else like it that's happening at the time, or since, frankly, or since. So Leos Janacek. We move onward. This is a performance by the Doric String Quartet from February 17th of 2019. So last year, the Doric Quartet. Also one of my favorites. I play favorites. See what we have here. Okay. This is about 5.5 minutes long.
Okay.
Bartok.
Bartok.
Messiaen.
Messiaen.
Yeah, same school.
Ah,
Come on, Greg.
It almost sounds Spanish to me. I don't know. I haven't a clue.
whoa, Spanish.
No clue.
John Felton wins. Bella Bartok.
Bartok.
So Derek, is that number 2?
No,
No, it's not number 2. It's an early one, right?
it's one of the 6.
Yeah. Hey, good bet.
One of our favorites. One of the 6.
Not number 7.
I think that one of the things that is very distinctive is the rhythms.
Correct. It's this piece, this movement in particular, is all about the meter, actually, to be more specific.
Yeah.
It's very disjointed, ba, 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 ba. And I have the score here, and I will show you the score. This is Bella Bartok's 5th quartet. And this is the middle movement, and it's alla Bulgarese. So it's based on a Bulgarian folk tune. And let me, I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on. So, look at the time signature for you musicians.
Ooh. Ooh.
So this is basically a 9/8 bar split 4 + 2 + 3.
Yep.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 blah, 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 blah. All throughout with
I think
with
he's
some
just showing off.
some variation. I'm sorry the scan is not great, but it's all about, as Ellen Dean had said, it's really all about that funky meter where it's just completely disjointed, and then this fiddling, really high register fiddling that's happening, and it's very, 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 very Bartok. And why is it very Bartok? Where does Bartok fit in? Heaven knows.
Well, he just doesn't. Yeah.
So
But
Bartok.
we should have guessed, because the quartets they'd love to sort of round out their programs with, instead of just a full German program, they'd love to throw in a Shostakovich or a Bartok.
Yeah.
They'd love to mix things up that way.
Yeah, I mean, for string quartets, the Shostakovich, the 15 quartets of Shostakovich and the 6 quartets of Bartok are seminal repertoire. I mean,
Yep.
I would hate to say they're round out programs. They are pieces that quartets really, really sink their teeth in through the course of their entire careers.
Yeah, maybe round out is not the
yeah, but
correct
not
term.
unlike. Yeah, it's okay. Not unlike the Beethoven quartets. It's that seminal, this repertoire.
Yeah.
And Bartok was very unique in that, he took what I had said with Janacek, who was into folklore and folk music and things. Bartok took it to the extreme. He was actually what's known now as an ethnomusicologist, who really, rolled up his sleeves, and he actually went to the countryside of Hungary and notated Hungarian folk music in all towns all over Hungary. His compatriot, also Zoltán Kodály, did the same thing. And they came from, their music couldn't be more different, frankly. Couldn't be more different. There's more of a simplicity to Kodály's music, but Bartok took strict notes and notated these folk themes. And it's fascinating in that I only recently learned in studying for a future radio program that these notebooks of Bartok's are housed at Columbia University. Yeah. And they're fascinating, and you see them, and they're just, it's notated music of Bartok taking from these Hungarian musicians.
Well, he
So-
spent his last years at Columbia.
Yes, he did.
And he was very badly treated there. I mean, he
Yes.
was starving, and but he wrote in some places how he loved walking across the campus and seeing the majestic the library building, and he loved it there. But he was not given anything like the recognition he should have been given.
No, and that was pretty much throughout his career. So this is one of the last pieces that he wrote in Hungary before he emigrated to the United States because of the war. This piece
Derek,
was written in 1934.
Bulgarian?
I'm sorry?
You said this was based on a Bulgarian folk?
Correct. Yes.
As anyone else, the Bulgarian folk music is really rhythmically complex. Time signatures are outrageous. Has anybody else here heard Ivo Popasov and the Bulgarian Wedding Band, which has been making the avant-garde rounds the last 20, 30 years in the United States? No one. Okay.
No, that's one. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Crazy, just wild, fast time signatures.
Yeah, as evidenced by this particular movement. I mean, it's his music. You know, again, it's singular. It's so wild. I mean, there's a wildness to his. It's the harmonies and the rhythms and especially in the string quartets. I mean, you can listen to pieces like, you know, everyone knows the Concerto for Orchestra, but the Miraculous Mandarin, for instance, it's very, very, it's not played that much, and it should be. It's such an exotic piece. It's wonderful. And Bartók, yeah, he was I think especially in the quartets, that's where I think the meat of his repertoire is, frankly. I mean, the piano concerti for sure. The viola concerto is quite wonderful as well. But these recordings, I don't like to recommend recordings, but I went hog wild last session about recommending recordings. But if you can get a hold of the Sándor Vég quartet, complete Bartóks, Sándor Vég, who is a very famous Hungarian violinist, was very active in the 50s and 60s. Those recordings of the Bartóks are, I think, the seminal recordings that you can have. And they're such important works for string players, for string quartets. They're just so important. You know, I don't like to do cycles, and this year it's funny, my Beethoven cycle got wiped off the map. But a Bartók cycle is something that I definitely would like to do. But it's very demanding as well. You hear how difficult this music is for the quartets. So to pump out 6 quartets and 2 concerts of Bartók, it's a lot, but it can be done. But it's something that I'm very interested in doing in the future. So we move on to our last selection. It's about 8 o'clock. And I'm afraid I gave away who this was through my email. Igor Stravinsky. We can't, you know, we already looked at Stravinsky and Petrushka, but part of the reason I wanted to include Stravinsky in this, well, we'll get into it afterwards, but is that it's a chamber orchestra performance, and we don't do a lot of chamber orchestras on the series anymore, and there's a reason for that. They're quite expensive. And our last chamber orchestra that we presented was quite a financial disaster. So it's just touring groups that are not full orchestras these days it's a very expensive endeavor, and it's just, you know, I would have to charge, you know, exorbitant ticket prices in order to present them, and I don't think that's kind of what I want to do. But this is a recording from October 27th of 2001 with the Camerata Ireland and Barry Douglas, who was conducting and playing piano. He did a Mozart concerto on the program as well. So this is from October 27th, 2001, and I'll give you the piece. This is the Dumbarton Oaks concerto. So let's give a listen.
No sound.
Sorry. Sorry. Oh boy.
You're fired.
I'm telling you, I gotta click the button. Hold on. Here we go. Sorry. Oi. So, what makes that so Stravinsky?
The propulsive quality, which is it's constantly pushing you ahead, even the pauses in those lyric passages, and then you just go through with. It's I've never, I have to confess, I've never been the biggest fan of Stravinsky, but a wonderful composer. I mean, it's clear, it's terrific.
A lot of broken chords, a series of broken chords, and then it's interrupted by something else, and he's back to the broken chords.
I'd say multiple alternating time signatures, playing some of the Stravinsky music. You have a different time signature almost every other bar. It keeps mixing things up, and no cadences. It's atonal.
And the spareness of the orchestration or of the instrumentation, right? The kind of gaping holes in a way, you're not sure who has the melody. And the other thing is, Derek, in terms of tonight, the ironic thing about him is that he came after himself a number of different times, right? He put on different guises.
Mm-hmm.
So he.
You're jumping the gun, Paul. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
He was so.
Go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, Derek. That's fine.
Well, I think, you know, what makes him unique is that you have this, and as Gary had said, it's like the time signature change. It's very jaunty. It's very, you're shifting like this. It's the meter is constantly changing. But as Paul was alluding to, and I just jumped all over it, is that Stravinsky, you know, morphed throughout his career. I liken him to Picasso, where he would have these phases in his career, but no matter what phase either Picasso or Stravinsky were in, it was distinctly them. And this piece, Dumbarton Oaks, it was commissioned as perhaps John Felting will know. You know, Dumbarton Oaks was an estate outside of Washington, D.C. This, I forget the name of the family. I don't know, was it Woods? Yeah, they were art collectors, very savvy people. They had, you know, tapestries of El Greco in their place, and they commissioned Stravinsky, and that's why it's named Dumbarton Oaks. And this piece was written in between 37 and 38, and it's part of he had a neoclassic period. And this is a very neoclassical piece in many respects. I mean, you have the movements ending in a major chord, which is very unlike Stravinsky. But what do you think this piece was fashioned after? Did he use anything else as a model?
The one we heard before.
I'm not that clever.
No. I thought it was the one we heard before.
So Stravinsky fashioned this after the Brandenburg Concerti.
Ah, okay.
And he was actually accused of lifting directly from Bach in some of the melodies. I don't hear it. I'm not. If I looked at the score and examined the score, I could probably say, "Aha!" You know, that's Bach. But this was fashioned after a Brandenburg concerto. It's a fast, slow, fast. There's no, you know, there were small pauses between movements, but there's no proper pause movements.
Bach
But
would be amazed.
I'm sorry?
Bach would be amazed.
Bach would be amazed. I think Bach's head would explode.
Yeah, he'd have his fingers in his ears.
I don't think so. I think he would hear it.
Possibly.
Yes.
I mean, but with Stravinsky in particular, you know, his singularity is transformative throughout his career. You know, he started, you know, we heard Petrushka just the other week, which was, you know, 25 years before this piece. Big orchestra, big orchestration. And I think that the comment about it being spare, this is something that is common with his neoclassic period. Spare orchestration, open intervals, open chords. But he shifts throughout his career. And you know, this period, you know, Pulcinella sort of kicked off this, you know, the Pulcinella suite in ballet kicked off this period. But then even, you know, he was a tricky guy, Stravinsky. He used to, you know, if you read his early quotes, he contradicts himself later in his life all the time. He was just hated Schoenberg, thought the 12-tone method was just the dumbest thing, ridiculous. Schoenberg dies in 51, and what does Stravinsky do? He starts writing 12-tone music. Famously in Agon, and he has the Requiem canticles toward the end of his life, and the septet. So, you know, Stravinsky is sort of he's a character, but even throughout these different phases and stylistic periods in his life, it's always Stravinsky. It's very distinctively Stravinsky. And I think leading to the meter and the rhythm it's always that sort of jauntiness, this uneasy rhythmic pulse that we were speaking to. So to wrap things up, how do we tie all these people together? What's the commonality between all of these composers?
Well, you use the word iconoclasts, right?
Yes.
They were, I guess, completely schooled in the traditions that came before, and decided that there were new twists that they wanted to put on them. And as you said too, are there followers? Is there a school of Stravinsky? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or any of the others? Not really.
Yeah. I find it interesting that none of them come from Germany. They all come from elsewhere. The
So
seed
none
of
of
Western classical music, all of these composers come from elsewhere, bringing something different into the mix. And I think that's fascinating. And yes, it's based on what you had said, Paul, of course, traditional studies and things, but they take a sort of flavor of where they're from and they infuse their art with it. And I think that's fascinating. All of them. And I have to tell you, in me putting together tonight's program, that wasn't, I wasn't going for it. And I was like, wow, well, look at all of them. They're all coming from distinctive backgrounds. Even Chopin, when he moves himself to Paris, and he was Parisian all his adult life, still Polish, and still holding this quality. And I think it's interesting. And I think that's something to be said with now classical music. We're only talking about the first couple hundred years, and now we're in this world where after we got to 1938 tonight, things just splinter and go off in all sorts of different directions in the 20th century and continue to do so. And some listeners find that to be problematic because there's just so many different idioms and styles that are going on now. But wow, it's so interesting to hear all of the innovations onto what Paul had said, these traditional forms and traditional, even basic things like counterpoint, and which would eventually lead us to John Cage writing 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Do we know that piece?
Yes.
Silence.
Silence. Yes. Well, it's not silence.
Yeah.
It's the sound of the room. But I found it fascinating that all these characters, sort of, even Ives, they all they weren't from the Mozart, Haydn sort of background. So anyway, something to think about. That's it for tonight.
Great show.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Nice.
Thanks, Derek.
Collection of unique, iconoclastic composers, Derek.
Thank you.
I couldn't.
I just, yeah. Look, there's so much music. There's so much.
Indeed.
And it's all wonderful. We're sitting here listening to a Stravinsky, essentially a concerto grosso tonight, something that I haven't been presenting at all. And it's marvelous. There's so much music that we can explore, and there's always something to discover. And I really enjoy discovering it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next Monday night.
Very good.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.